In addition to the research and analysis piece, we also do convening and facilitate collaboration across the network, including with network teams working on emerging and important topics like heat pump utilization in Vermont and the region. And we're thrilled that Kelly Lucci from Efficiency Vermont and Richard Cowart from the Regulatory Assistance Project are co-chairing this effort to learn more about what we know about heat pump installation and use, which we had a webinar on last month. For folks who missed that recording is up on the EAN website, as are the slides. And this is part two of that webinar series, how to improve heat pump installation and use in Vermont, kind of looking forward. And I also want to share, we'll say more about this at the end of the webinar. We've also been really grateful to hear feedback that it would be awesome to have the opportunity to hear from contractors and heat pump users. And so we're looking actually now at a third webinar and making this a three-part series. So please stay tuned for that. And if you have feedback on that, please let us know. But for today, I want to invite folks to please stay muted during the presentations. Then we will do Q&A at the end. Please make note of any questions you have as you go, and then you can put them in the chat at the end. And depending on how many we have, I'll either ask you to come on and ask your question, or I'll take a couple of them together and pose them to the panelists in the interest of time. And those panelists are Kelly Lucci and Phil Bickle from Efficiency Vermont, who are going to talk about the Vermont Heat Pump Action Plan, Nate Gunnish from Burlington Electric Department, Bridget Gifford from Efficiency Maine, and Tara McElhenney from Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership, or NEEP. So they're going to go back to back with their presentations. So unless there is anything else, panelists or Kara, and I want to thank Kara Robacek, who many of you know, EAN's network manager and deputy director, for all of her great work organizing and preparing this webinar today. I think we'll get started. Over to you, Kelly.
Thank you, Jared. So as Jared said, I'm Kelly Lucci. I'm with Efficiency Vermont, and I'll be co-presenting today with my colleague, Phil Bickle. Phil actually runs our HVAC, our heat pump program. And as you heard, I'm a co-chair of this EAN group and work really close with EAN. So we thought we'd take it together. So Kara, you can advance to the next slide. Just a quick review. Efficiency Vermont, for folks who aren't familiar, is Vermont's statewide, except Burlington, energy efficiency utility. So our focus is on electric efficiency for the whole state outside of Burlington Electric Department territory. And we also focus on thermal efficiency outside of Vermont Gas Systems territory. But our goal is to really try to drive consistency, coordination across a whole lot of market actors in the state to help bring costs down for customers and ensure they have the opportunity to integrate new technologies into their homes and businesses. Go to the next slide, Kara. So as Jared mentioned, this is the second of 3 webinars. And so recognizing that some folks who are joining today may not have been able to participate in the first webinar, know, one, that there's a great recording available on the EAN website. So I recommend, if this is a topic of interest, that you take a spin over there and dig in. But just in case you don't have the time, I thought I'd give a really quick primer on what we shared last time. So Efficiency Vermont has statewide heat pump program, as I mentioned, and that really is designed to be pretty seamless for customers, because there's a lot of work done through the supply chain with manufacturers, with distributors, with retailers, with contractors, such that you don't, as a customer in Vermont, if you're installing a heat pump, you don't have to go to our website and fill out a separate rebate form. You don't have to do research on those rebates necessarily. You can call us; we'll tell you what's going on. But at point of sale, you are getting a buy down from the efficiency utilities, and that is based on the fact that we work really closely with all these market actors to ensure that those heat pumps are optimally efficient on the electric side. So they are not going to install a heat pump supported by our program that can't effectively heat a home in Vermont in a cold climate. And that is super important because there are a lot of heat pumps, sold in other parts of the country where that isn't necessary. But we recognized in Vermont, we wanted to make sure that people would have that opportunity and that if they were going to do it, they wouldn't be spending any more on electricity than they needed to. So, Cara, if you could just advance the animation. So bottom line, because we have this sort of deeply embedded supply chain based program, it means that nearly every heat pump that's been installed in Vermont over the last decade has met a very high standard for electric efficiency, and it has the ability, whether a customer wants to use it that way or not, is ultimately down to the customer, but we certainly provide them with the opportunity to and a lot of information and support as they consider that option to heat in this cold climate. Just one last point I wanted to make. So specifically, because it might be a point of interest for folks, if a heat pump is going through this statewide program where we collaborate with the supply chain and with our distribution utility partners, it's going to have a minimum coefficient of performance of 1.75 down to 5 degrees Fahrenheit. And we can dig in a little bit more on the specifics about coefficient of performance. I suspect a lot of people on this call have a sense of that already, but we can go there if we need to as we continue advancing. Next slide, Cara. So again, just a quick review of where we're at this point. After a decade plus of this statewide program, we've got pretty significant uptake in adoption over those years. We think and we hear from supply chain partners that consistency in terms of how we approach a technology can really help give them the confidence to jump into the market. And it's been very exciting. I think we've seen the market take off for cold climate heat pumps in Vermont in a big way. And you'll notice on these bars, we're seeing an increasing prevalence of ducted heat pumps as well. So a lot of what I'm talking about here are ductless mini split heat pumps, but we are increasingly seeing, more complex installations where those can be, where those can fit into sort of a home's existing distribution system. All right, next slide, please. So in our last webinar, Efficiency Vermont shared our Vermont heat pump market assessment. I just shared a little bit of the takeaways from that, just as a point of review. So we undertook an effort with a range of partners to kind of understand what was the state of heat pump adoption in Vermont? What did customers think about it? What were the opportunities to do better? So I shared some of the takeaways on the prior slides, and I just want to land on a couple other key points of finding from that assessment. So customers generally who have heat pumps are very happy with them. They appreciate the reliability and the comfort that they offer. However, it was clear too that many of those customers are not using their heat pumps for heating as much as they could. A lot of them were using them for air conditioning, and certainly during shoulder seasons, less so throughout the winter, as we might advise they could. In addition, high upfront costs and limited contractor availability continue to hinder wide adoption, as does outdated housing infrastructure. Heat pumps they aren't appropriate. They aren't the best fit for every kind of housing solution. Certainly, there are a lot of homes in Vermont that continue to be older, have a more segmented floor plan, are not weatherized. That's going to be really challenging for a mini split heat pump. Many homes in the state, I think most prevalently, have hydronic distribution systems, and air to water heat pump technology is still in a relatively nascent phase. So there are some kind of facets of the market that make it challenging to, have adoption of heat pumps take off super widely, despite the really great progress we've seen. So identified that there is a need for some targeted interventions, really to look at the customers who've already installed heat pumps and those who might in the future might be thinking about it, to try to sort of take what we've learned and, build on the strong foundation to drive more usage in winter, particularly where that's going to help customers save money. Next slide. Okay, so this webinar, the real focus, and I'm going to turn it over to Phil in a minute to go into the details, but the real focus here is, we did a market assessment and then we sort of took all those findings and we wanted to articulate forward looking. What's an action plan that we all, as participants in this market, as program administrators, Efficiency Vermont, electric distribution utilities, and others engaged in this space, how can we plan sort of a coordinated approach for the next several years, knowing what we now know about the heat pump market and where customers are at? So Phil will dig into the really deep specifics of it. I'm going to kind of be a bookend on his presentation. And I just wanted to name a few things that have been particular points of interest I've fielded questions on lately, just to make sure folks have those kind of top of mind. So first off, we're talking a few areas of focus. Consumer education. As I named, this is now and this is ongoing. So the great thing about the statewide program is we know who has installed heat pumps, and we have the ability to reach back out and help provide them with information that can support them in using their heat pumps a little bit differently. And we know from the surveys that we conducted as part of our market assessment that there's a good segment of customers who are still interested in this technology, considering what it might mean for their homes. So this is a great opportunity for us to evolve our approach to marketing and messaging to account for that new information. And frankly, have like a great raft of folks who are already in the funnel, have already adopted heat pumps, might consider adding another mini split, might be thinking about, when their current system fails and what they want to do for replacement. So consumer education will be a big focus. Another big focus is going to be contractor engagement and frankly, contractor collaboration. There are a lot of contractors who have jumped into this space, who are installing mini splits, have built their businesses around it. That's incredible. That really drives market transformation for given technologies. When you see, folks in the supply chain who are identifying business opportunities. And we know that that engagement that a contractor has with a customer at the point they're considering an installation or they have just installed a heat pump is a really critical opportunity to, help influence the customer choice about what they install and how they ultimately use it. So really big opportunity to engage with contractors, to double down on training and best practices, helping to support and incentivize contractors to install systems that are capable of heating a whole home, are designed to serve that purpose. And we're looking at how we can, frankly, support contractors in sort of transitioning their focus a little bit and want to work with them to understand what's that going to look like? How can we as program administrators support them in moving more in that direction with customers? And then finally, you'll note the contractor work is going to be happening over the course of this year. In tandem with that, we're also going to be designing a new program to layer on top of the existing statewide point of sale rebate and look at how do we provide more customized and greater level of financial support to customers who install systems that are capable of providing the majority of their home's heating load. So we're in design now, very early stages. But we expect to be doing a lot of work on that this year in preparation for unrolling that program at some point in 2027. So Phil, again, we'll talk a little bit more about the three of these in addition to some other things we're thinking about. And then I will come back at the end to close us out. So with that, Phil, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. Good afternoon, everyone. Starting with customer education, Kelly mentioned a couple slides back that, overall, we found through surveying customers that they're happy with their heat pumps and they're generally very happy with the heat pumps, and they really like and really focus a lot on how they cool their homes. So one of the things that we're currently doing right now is to review the existing materials that we've created that promote heat pumps. We're refreshing this information and making sure that we're focusing that the messaging focuses on the usage, maintenance, as well as myth busting. Just for an example, for many years, one of the most visited pages on efficiencyvermont.com was a blog post titled 8 Ways Not to Use a Heat Pump. As part of this refresh, our marketing team reviewed the information and added a little bit. And now the page is, this came out in the fall, is now 9 ways to get the most out of your heat pump all winter. So really, again, focusing on best practices of using heat pump, but also adding in a little bit more of a reminder that this is really, being able to use the heat pump all winter. And then again, engaging with customers who have already installed heat pumps and as well as the ones who aren't, trying to figure out, what are some of the barriers, or how do we know what some of the barriers are now. We talked a little bit about it last time. So how do we help to overcome those barriers, as well as get people to be more comfortable to move forward with a heat pump project that will not just cool their home, if that's what started them on this journey to getting a heat pump, but then also leveraging that in their home to heat for as long as possible. So this is sort of an ongoing thing that we're doing. It started a little bit now, but this will continue throughout the year as we develop our engagement with contractors, which I'll get into in a moment, as well as the whole home program, which we'll talk about later. So on the next slide, we can focus on contractor engagement. Our team regularly meets with our Efficiency Excellence Network heat pump contractors. We've been talking to them for over a year now about evolving this program, making sure that we bring them along as we consider what this new whole home program would look like, or even just the whole shifting the focus of how we're asking them to speak to customers about heat pumps, but also just to encourage more of the year-round usage. If EEN contractors have an account manager from our supply chain team that they can connect with whenever they have questions or feedback about our programs. So we have this continuous feedback loop that before we make any decisions on what we're going to do that will impact how we're promoting or incentivizing heat pumps, we have our contractor partners fully engaged in that decision. And the contractors that we are most engaged with have expressed support with the idea of requiring load calculations for whole home heat pump projects. And that's something that doesn't always happen with heat pump installations, especially when the customer is just focused on just doing space heating, cooling. So what we're doing is, what we plan to do is throughout this year and sort of by mid-year, identifying trainings and tools that will focus on both heat pump sizing, for example, again, doing load calculations, but also tools that help make that work a lot easier. Right now, historically or traditionally, it's been very intensive with measuring the rooms and the space and, writing that down on paper, doing calculations and stuff. But there's tools now that can make that load calc happen in just like 15 minutes or less. So identifying some of these tools that'll work and helping contractors adopt them, and as well as installation best practices. Contractors could be compensated for their time or resources spent in these trainings, but a lot of that part is still TBD, and that we're working on. And again, as we have iterations of this, sharing this with our contractor partners. So then that brings us to the new whole home incentive. We're still in the very early stages of planning this, but to date, we've looked at approaches that other programs have taken supporting whole home heat pump projects. We'll hear from Efficiency Maine in a bit about their program. We're taking lessons learned from our other, partners like Efficiency Maine or other programs in the region, and we're going to be applying that to Vermont. And what we see here on the slide is some of the things that we're already looking at right now, or it's already definitely going to happen in terms of we definitely want to do like tiered incentives to provide increased support for low and moderate income customers. We want to layer these onto the existing point of sale rebate, which is we want to do that because we want to ensure that there is an incentive for our contractors to be purchasing these at from a participating distributor. This ensures that our distribution partners are continuing to supply these heat pumps. So maintaining like a base midstream point of sale rebate, and then adding on a downstream rebate that again could be or is tailored to that specific project. Moving on to the next slide. The Heat Pump Action Plan talks a little bit about encouraging innovation and as well as accessibility. One way we do this as we continue to track these developments is through our ongoing participation in working groups sponsored by regional energy efficiency organizations such as NEEP. They have a residential heating electrification working group that we participate in. And through these types of working groups, we have the opportunity to interact directly with manufacturers as well as other program administrators. So there's a lot of shared best practices, discussions about products that are coming out, the latest innovations, and as well as innovations in technology and program delivery. One of these examples, or one example of developing heat pump technology is with air-to-water heat pumps. And that's in the illustration that's on the left-hand side of the screen there. They've been around for a while, and we've had an air-to-water heat pump rebate since 2019. But we're only now just seeing models that are available in the market that provide heating water at temperatures that a boiler that boilers typically produce, so around 160 degrees or higher. Last month, Efficiency Vermont co-sponsored an air-to-water heat pump summit that brought together contractors, manufacturers, and industry experts in an effort to expand the installer network in Vermont. And as you know, once we can get to that ability to replace a boiler for hydronic baseboard heating with an air-to-water heat pump, then that becomes another whole home heat pump system that is again just takes over the existing infrastructure. You see example in the middle there of the window heat pumps. This is something that could be ideal for renters and other homes that would have difficulty installing a ducted or a ductless heat pump. So we're hoping to have a program on that some point in the next year. And then finally, on the last slide here, we're talking about complementary actions. We're not going to make weatherization a prerequisite to receive the heat pump rebate because we don't want to discourage people or put up barriers to installing heat pumps. As we've discussed, oftentimes the need for cooling is a big driver of doing a heat pump project. So we'll continue to promote and assist people doing weatherization, but not making it a requirement to get a whole home rebate. Same thing goes for integrated controls. It's been a little bit of a challenge to increase adoption of integrated controls for ductless heat pumps. They aren't a great fit for every home or heat pump install, so we have to be careful how we promote them. Contractors have told us they're a little hesitant to add those to their product line, partially given the lack of familiarity with the technology, and also it's not heat pump equipment. It's a combination thermostat sensor. Could require some light electrical work as well as commissioning the controllers that work together, commissioning the integrated controller and the smart thermostat to work together. So it's not necessarily something that they would normally be doing, and without a lot of awareness for customers asking for it, they haven't been as enthusiastic about taking that on as technology. So there's still more to come. We're still continuing to refine our approach in an effort to help customers with integrated controllers or weatherization, other things that can help maximize the benefits of heating with heat pumps. So that's what we're doing there. And then I will turn it back to Kelly.
Yep. And this is our final slide. And I know we went a teeny bit long, Jared, so thank you for your patience. I'm just going to land it by just, again, speaking to those things I tend to get the most questions about externally. So real focus on customer education, both those who've already installed a heat pump and could use it differently or do more, as well as those who are considering it. Focus on engaging contractors because they're absolutely critical to helping support this adoption. And we want to make sure they still feel invested in helping to grow this market and support their customers in using heat pumps differently. And then, engaging in a sort of two-way feedback, really thoughtful program design process informed by what we're hearing from other states and folks around the region, as well as customers and supply chain partners as we think about introducing a new whole home program in 2027. So thank you again.
Thanks so much, Kelly, and thanks, Phil. Really informative, and happy now to go right over to Nate Gunnish from Burlington Electric Department. Nate,
Awesome.
please go ahead.
Thanks, Jared. And thanks, Kelly and Phil, for setting the scene. That's really helpful. I'm going to talk today. I'll just introduce myself. I'll say I'm a Department of Energy Fellow here at the Burlington Electric Department. And I'm going to talk today about our Building Giants program. And Giants, as you can see here, stands for Grid Edge Integrated and Aggregated Network of Thermal Storage. I didn't come up with that, but whoever did, it's very clever. And fundamentally, this is a program that Burlington Electric Department is launching to help promote the next phase of heat pump adoption in Vermont. As Jared started us off with, we're thinking about how to improve installation and use of heat pumps here in Vermont. So this is you could think of it kind of as an example or a case study, something that one of the entities in the energy space here in Vermont is doing to take us into the next phase of heat pump adoption and support for heat pumps here in Vermont. So, Kara, if you go to the next slide, I'll just talk quickly about who BED is, and you can trigger next, Kara, and we'll just talk about this real quick. BED is a municipal utility in Burlington. I think a lot of you already know that. About 21,000 customers. We have a wide mix of things we do because we operate generation assets, we have distribution, and we do energy efficiency. So, as Kelly mentioned, we have an independent energy efficiency utility just for the Burlington territory, separate from EVT. No lack of collaboration, but just separate from EVT. And I put this 2030 vision piece here on this slide just to emphasize that the city of Burlington has net zero 2030 goals, and the Burlington Electric Department is really essential to that. We are working hard to help those city goals come to fruition, and this program is kind of part of that. Next, Kara, please. I'll just mention that we have a lot of renters. And then we have a lot of VGS customers. I think Tim's in this meeting. So, we have a lot of great collaboration with VGS for sure. But it does complicate heat pump adoption. I think a lot of people here are aware that the cost effectiveness of heating with heat pumps is, less advantageous when compared to natural gas, all depending on outdoor temp. Don't need to get into that right now. But in natural gas territory, it's more difficult to incentivize full scale heating with ductless heat pumps or any heat pumps. And Karen, if you could hit next, please, I'll just show that I used to have a wall-mounted Rinnai natural gas space heater in a rented apartment. They're all like, there's this kind of thing all over Burlington. It makes it tricky, but this isn't super important, but just to ground everybody in the fact that there are a lot of weird buildings in Burlington. They're almost all natural gas. A lot of the HVAC systems are pretty old or not very well designed. So we have kind of a tricky starting position. Next slide, please. So what is Building Giants, right? I already said what the acronym stands for. This is a program that's supported by a Department of Energy GRIP grant. GRIP is the Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnership. We have quite a bit of money supporting this program from the federal government. We've maintained that funding, which has been great. And this is kind of the core piece, right? So what do? We're promoting flexible load management of distributed energy resources. We are, so flexible load management, for people who don't know, is essentially the effort to move demand from more expensive and higher emitting, more carbon emission times of day or times of year based on the conditions on the grid, and move that energy usage into times of day when there's higher solar saturation or other renewables available on the grid. Lowers costs, it increases reliability, and importantly, it cuts emissions. So that's what we're doing when we do flexible load management. A lot of people maybe know about like defeat the peak programs or other demand response initiatives. This is just the next iteration of that type of technology. I'll mention that we have residential and CNI components to this program. I'm not going to talk about the CNI program here, but if anyone has any questions, they're welcome to reach out to me to ask about it. Residential fundamentally is less about specific rate classes or being truly a residential property, and more to make it clear that we're talking about ductless heat pumps, right? So, which is by and large a residential technology. Not always, but when we talk about our residential program, this is a ductless heat pump program within Building Giants. Kara, if you could hit next, I'll just emphasize that our net zero energy program in Burlington, a big part of it is efficient electric buildings, right? So we need heat pump adoption for so many reasons, but this is just a core goal here at BED and at the city of Burlington. So what we're doing, and Kara, if you please hit next, We are promoting adoption through optimization, right? So what flexible load management does, and I'll talk about this more on the next slide, but we are by improving the optimization of how we use our heat pumps, we can actually improve the cost effectiveness um, of those heat pumps and therefore support adoption. That's fundamentally what's going on here. Next, please. So, okay, so why are we doing this? As I said, getting into this, we want to support resilience and affordability. For those of you who don't operate in the DU space, the distribution utility space, a lot of costs come from capacity, right? Demand, peaks. These are from the grid operator, ISO New England, the Vermont transmission operator, Velco, also things like transmission and distribution cost. These things like distribution line upgrades or transformer upgrades. There's costs associated with those things that we'd like to avoid, and we can also mitigate the risk of peaks. So we're trying to make the grid more resilient and more affordable generally. Next, please, Kara. Which then can help drive heat pump adoption, right? So we lower the cost of electrification by lowering the costs of capacity, again, by shaving those peaks with flexible load management. This lowers inflationary pressure on rates. I can mention this a little bit later if people are curious about it, but we're considering specific end use rates for electrification. This is similar to our EV rate, if anyone is familiar with that. And ultimately, that can drive cost competitiveness with natural gas, which, as I mentioned earlier, is a key issue here in Burlington for heat pump adoption. This is just a graphical way of describing that, right? We've got transformers, we've got transmission lines. Next, Kara, please. We have heat pumps, right? So those, when we drive up demand through heat pump adoption, we risk driving up costs in our grid infrastructure, our transformers and our transmission lines. So we want to manage those two things. And if we can decrease the price in pressure on our infrastructure, we can keep the rates associated with heat pumps lower, and that can drive adoption. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is just kind of to give some graphs to show what we're talking about, right? The graph on the left is all of Velco's load last week. The graph on the right is the Burlington Electric Department office, 545 Pine, if no one's been there before. We have behind the meter solar, also just a couple days ago. And you can see that load drops a ton during the middle of the day. This is that solar saturation that I'm talking about. I think a lot of you know about the duck curve in Vermont. But fundamentally, we're trying to shift energy usage from those humps on either end into that core area in the middle, because that helps us save money and ultimately cut emissions by reducing reducing energy usage during those high emission periods. This is just another graph to show, I'm not saying which customer this is. This is one of our CNI customers that we piloted previously. But fundamentally, this graph shows the same thing, right? The vertical bar is when the actual grid peak took place. So that's what drives a lot of costs. And what we're doing is shifting actual usage. There's not a huge change. Often there's almost no change in total energy used, but we're shifting when it occurs away from the peak. And on the next slide, I can talk about how that works. The gentleman in the bottom right, I don't know if anybody here knows Freddie Hall, but this whole program is sort of his brainchild. So I just want to give him a shout out. He cooked a lot of this up. So Freddie, if you're here, thanks. But fundamentally, we are for the residential program. It's fairly simple technology, right? We install some kind of heat pump controller. I know Phil just said that integrated controls. There's some hesitancy from installers. So we're pretty hands-on with how this works, right? We're working directly with customers to make sure that there's a smart heat pump controller installed in people's homes, whole home energy monitor to track energy usage, part of our data collection initiative. And then we can remotely request set point adjustments. So moving, generally speaking, cooling load, but we can do this with heating as well, from those peak periods when the grid is the dirtiest into those high solar saturation periods, just through set point adjustments. Again, if anyone has questions about the technology, maybe I can come back to those in the Q&A session. I want to keep moving along. So what's next for us? Kelly, I mentioned, being forward looking, right? And also mentioned supporting heat pumps through point of sale. So we're being forward looking in the heat pump market by trying to go beyond point of sale support for heat pumps, right? So we want to take what we've been doing from a fairly small pilot into a real full-scale program. And in that time, we're hoping to collect a lot of data, right? See how our emissions reduction goes by shifting demand on the grid. How much cost we save, right, when we shift away from those high cost capacity periods. We're going to collect a lot of data over the next few years and ideally convert that into something of an electrified heating rate. Again, I mentioned this is similar to our EV rate, but fundamentally, we'd like to be able to offer lower cost electricity for customers with ductless heat pumps, as long as they're able to participate in this kind of flexible program. So we're thinking long term about how to drive adoption by lowering the cost of operating heat pumps across the board. Next, please, Kara. I just am reiterating that this is adoption through optimization, right? So we want to make it so that heat pumps can operate more cost effectively, so we can lower the costs of using a heat pump, and that in turn can spur adoption. If anyone has any questions about the program, you're welcome to reach out to me directly, but this is kind of what BED's up to. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Nate. And so now we're going to pivot from information about what we're seeing across Vermont to our sister state of Maine. Bridget Gifford from Efficiency Maine is going to speak. We're thrilled to have Bridget with us. I think there's probably no state that is a bit better pure comparison and pure example than Maine in terms of the similar cold climate, similar reliance on delivered very expensive, price volatile, and heavily polluting heating fuels like fuel oil and propane. So Bridget, thank you for joining us to share some of what you've been doing in Maine and what you've been learning.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. So many commonalities. Also, just the structure of Efficiency Maine is very much the same as Efficiency Vermont. So we'll launch right into it. This first slide here is just outlining the previous heat pump program that we had for many, many years. It was a supplemental heat pump. Folks wanted to, offset as much fossil fuel as possible. The state of Maine would help them do that with a rebate. And when we looked into why were we not getting the results that we expected, that, we weren't offsetting as much fossil fuel as we really thought we would. And so these are the behaviors we were finding with folks who were not using their heat pump as much as we thought. These were the reasons why: purchased for cooling only had a heat pump in the bedroom spaces, and just not using their heat pumps for heating whatsoever. So this is sort of the problem statement. This is what we're trying to change. And just in the interest of time, I'm going to go pretty quickly through my slides. But on the next slide, the key findings regarding the transition. So right now at Efficiency Maine, that's all we have is a rebate for homeowners who want to heat their homes with heat pumps. So it's a whole home heat pump program. And some of the biggest takeaways about the transition are outlined here. We're finding that fewer people are turning off their heat pumps in cold temperatures. So that's a huge win. There's a very high correlation between the perceived installer's confidence in heat pump technology and those customers that are heating their homes with heat pumps. So it is a requirement of the program that you are going to turn your thermostat, your central system boiler or furnace thermostat all the way down, and lean on your heat pumps. I'll get into a little bit about the sizing and things like that later. But we are seeing a big improvement. We're seeing that an increase in efficiencies in what we expected, because people are really setting it and forgetting it. They are mostly using single zones. We don't rebate multi-zones. And so there is a higher efficiency to be gained there. So it's been a great story. and we're getting the result we wanted, but it was a bumpy transition. So I just wanted to walk you through some of those bumps. And so next slide, please. These are the 5 levers of success. These are the things that we, you know, sort of look to when we're creating any kind of program. And there were learnings in each one of these things. And so I've outlined each learning on the next slide, starting off with offering motivating incentives. So our rebate for whole home heat pump technology is much larger than our supplemental rebate was. So that's a win. The installer community was pretty skeptical at first. It was very disruptive to, sort of their business model. And seeing those larger rebates was certainly, exciting for them. They just weren't super sure how they were going to make that work. But we also, under this sort of category, paying the rebates quickly is a very important aspect of the program success. So as soon as a day's time, getting that claim form into the office and that turnaround and getting it set up for payment very quickly is super important. Making the program easy. So depending on the income category, we have enhanced rebates for lower income folks, but that's all housed on the same claim form. So it's the same program, it's just that the rebate amount is a bit enhanced if you fall into one of these other categories. And we've got a verification process that happens sort of outside the program. On our website, folks can get income verified. We do not have any prerequisites that are in place. So, no weatherization that is needed prior to moving forward with the heat pump rebate program. Whatever folks want to do, we think they're all great. Any sort of efficiency project you want to undertake, we are fans of. So we don't want to make any prerequisites and sort of, introduce that friction to homeowners. We've got a sizing component to our program now that we never used to have. So installers can size 3 different ways. Manual J is one. Manual J is not the only way. There's some more simple ways that installers can size. And they do need to consider the specific location. So on our website, the Portland region, making sure that this whole home system is sized to work well down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit and offer, robust distribution is important. Bangor, those systems are sized for -7 degrees, and then Caribou and our northern areas are sized for -14 degrees. And there are lots and lots of heat pumps on the market that can do that job. And we do allow backup. Folks can keep their boilers and furnaces for emergency backup only, but there's a whole lot of Mainers who have no backup and are enjoying their heat pumps. So marketing, we meet constantly, just to be sure that this claim form and this whole program is not asking for too much information. We want to keep it super simple. And so we really, it's a whole hand-wringing exercise. Like, do we really need to collect this data? And if we really don't need it, then we don't ask. Or we collect it in a different way, maybe through surveys and other things. But we try to take it off the claim form itself to keep things streamlined for those installers. Marketing the program, we've got 1-800 number, and that's kind of the funnel for everything, for installers, for customers, and we're just trying to keep it super clear. If people have questions, where to call. There is a marketing reimbursement that we help installers with, up to half of their marketing cost. Cross-promoting. We tried hard to get heat pump installers to also think about installing some heat pump water heaters, just so the domestic hot water is taken care of and customers aren't leaving their boilers on to satisfy their water needs. It's such a different skill set that for the most part, the heat pump installers in Maine don't offer the water heating in addition, but it's certainly an opportunity, and we cross promote those rebates that we have so that those homeowners know, what they can do if they're still using an inefficient boiler for domestic hot water. When we market, we tend to highlight the benefits of the heat pumps and not the technology. We find it fascinating and nerd out on the technology itself, but homeowners just want to know, am I going to save money? Is it going to be easy? I don't want to be a guinea pig. Like, is this tested, tried and true technology? So we tend to lean on those messages that, 200,000 Mainers have already enjoyed heat pumps. This is safe, this is easy, nothing scary, nothing new. And next slide, please. We support all the different players in the chain here, so manufacturers, distributors, and installers. We, as a program team, get out into the community and engage a lot with our top performing installers just to really understand how is the program working for them. How can we do a better job supporting them? We do try to get their phones ringing quite quickly by a database on our website where customers can just pop in their zip code and populate everyone in their area that does these kinds of installations. But we want to marry up those interested folks with installers that are going to give them a call back, not just hobbyists who do 1 or 2 or 3 installs a year. So we do rank the results accordingly, and we have a team that just is available to those installers all the time, any questions whatsoever. And then this continuous improvement aspect of the program, we do QA on about a quarter of all of the projects, just to make sure that we're setting eyes on things and making sure that we are engaging with customers at that time. It's a great time to ask, how is your customer satisfaction, and what do you think of your heat pumps, and are you using these as your primary heating, and just to see the thermostat settings and engage with customers is super important. So I think that's my last slide. I tried to fly through so we have time for questions at the end, and I know Neep is following me, so thanks so much.
Thanks, Bridget. And Tara, over to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And good afternoon, all. And thanks for having me. And thanks for all the presenters who went before me and teed us up. So I'm Tara McElhenney, manager on our policy and programs team at NEAP. And NEAP serves as the regional convener of the New England Heat Pump Accelerator. So today I'll just zoom out a bit and share some regional context on the accelerator. Next slide, please. So first, I'll walk through a brief overview of what the accelerator is. Then I'll talk about some of the potential regional impacts on the heat pump market, including installation quality and use. And then finally, I'll close with just a few thoughts on what Vermonters may want to watch out for or learn from, or potentially take advantage of as this work moves forward. Next slide, please. Perfect. So at a high level, the New England Heat Pump Accelerator is a $450 million regional initiative across 5 of the New England states, funded by EPA's CPRG grants. And New England, as you know, is geographically very small, and shares a supply chain and similar climates, similar barriers that have been mentioned before. So we're taking a regional market transformation approach. And this will leverage the multi-state market to accelerate the adoption of heat pumps in residential homes. And aside from just increasing heat pump sales, it's really about transforming the market. So overcoming systemic barriers to electrification, making heat pumps a standard practice for HVAC and water heating, and delivering long-term greenhouse gas reductions for the region. Next, please. I won't go into all the details here, but just a few quick notes on governance. Each of the participating states share governance of the program through an advisory council, and it's balancing sort of where a regional approach adds value and where state-specific priorities can have room to enact on that. And you'll see asterisks here. While VAIC is the regional implementer for most activities in the program, Efficiency Maine is a state designee implementer for the Market Hub and the state pilots in Maine. Next, please. So this slide shows an overview of the three main areas of work. I'll get into some of the specifics later, but what you need to know is that the Market Hub has a midstream focus to spur and support heat pump adoption and supply through midstream incentives directly to distributors, supply chain engagement, and workforce development efforts. The Innovation Hub is focused on overcoming barriers, especially for low to moderate income residents, through state-level pilots, community grants, and technical support. And the Resource Hub will be the one-stop shop for learnings. And ultimately, this market transformation approach will develop a long-term strategic plan for the region as a whole beyond the program. Next. All right, so what can we expect the program to have an effect on the market and specifically installation quality and use? We expect the accelerator to achieve long-term impacts by overcoming specific barriers that can shift what technology people are buying and what suppliers are providing as the default choice. And we recognize that Vermont shares this regional market, so these impacts should be felt, including reduction in long-term cost savings and shifts in behavior throughout the supply chain. Next, please. And the accelerator's workforce development efforts are probably particularly useful to Vermonters because they are designed to address specific workforce gaps, working to build regional consistency and to strengthen the regional workforce. And the efforts are three-pronged, including upskilling incumbent workers, which will include working with existing partners and building new partnerships to improve and standardize training across the region. Small business support. This includes business boot camps and ongoing technical and business strategy support. And for new entrants, working with the various ecosystem actors to attract new workers and make sure job training and placement is high quality and attainable for folks wanting to get into the field. Next slide, please. And the program website hosts free training modules that are open to anyone. So Vermonters can benefit from these cold climate specific training resources. These can improve regional practices for sizing and design, installation, overall contractor confidence, and how systems are ultimately explained to customers and understood by and used by customers. Next slide, please. So next, the Innovation Hub will be testing and deploying scalable strategies to heat pump adoption barriers. And these could be in technology, program design and delivery, customer outreach and targeting, and financing, just to name a few. So each state will have $14.5 million in funding to deploy 1 to 2 pilots in their own state based on their specific priorities and the barriers they're aiming to overcome. And then we will have community grants, which will be $100,000 to $400,000 per grant for 20 to 40 grants throughout the duration of the program. And these proposals will be scored collectively by all of the states to get sort of a regional variety in technologies or solutions. And I think this is especially important for Vermont in that these pilots and grants should generate really useful lessons about what is actually helping improve uptake and improving real world use, especially for harder to reach customers. And while Vermont would not be eligible for these specific funding streams, there will still be a lot to learn from the approaches that emerge here. Next. And finally, data and insights is where Vermonters should see a lot of benefit as well. The resource hub that I mentioned before will be an accessible website that acts as a centralized resource for stakeholders, providing program information, transparency around the program performance and learning and impact. So this will include data visualization from both program data and full category sales data, which the region has been trying to get for the past few years, but there's been a gap. Maps, reports, and case studies to learn from, and plenty of resources to help trade professionals, policymakers, and community orgs address challenges, including heat pump installation and use. It'll also have annual program status reports and annual evaluation reports that will yield useful program learnings and regional insights. Next. So if Vermont is not formally part of the accelerator, what can Vermonters do with this? Next. So I'll highlight a few things to keep this regional momentum and provide consistency that several of the presenters mentioned for customers and market actors. Vermont may consider aligning with standards set in the accelerator states where appropriate. For example, in equipment eligibility specs or training curriculum. Next, learning from all the program data and resources from pilots, from the market data, so you can see how it's changing, where it's going, and understand where Vermont can plug in to complement efforts and improve their own. And plenty of educational resources will be available. And then finally, staying updated and engaged. You can sign up for monthly newsletters at the bottom of the program website linked here. And also, when you see any engagement opportunity, these are not always limited to coalition state actors. Your insights and thoughts are really helpful across the region. Vermont is part of the region, so while you can't directly apply for the funding, you should be able to provide input via surveys and RFIs and the like. So I encourage you to take advantage of the changes to the regional supply chains, workforce dynamics, and watch for shared challenges and wins. And thanks again for the opportunity to share this overview. If you have any questions, my contact info is on the next page. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tara, and thanks to all of our presenters. We are a little bit behind schedule, so I want to ask our presenters if any of them have to leave right at 1, and if you do, we can give you the first question. If not, for folks who are able to stay on for 10 or 15 minutes, I do want to make sure that we get to the questions that folks may have developed as they've listened to these presentations. So Phil, Kelly, Bridget, Nate, Tara, let me know if you have to go right away. Otherwise, if you can stay on for a little bit. Welcome questions in the chat. And I know that we had one at the beginning from Don. If you want to go ahead and ask your question, Don.
The question had to do with the apparent conflict between the time shifting that Burlington talked about and the efficiency of heat pumps being best if they're not messed with. So how is that accommodated by the time shifting?
Yeah, thanks, Don. Yeah, that is something we're aware of. We're not shifting a huge number of degrees any given day. Also, these are typically happening on design degree days that these peaks take place that we're monitoring. So we're going to be collecting a lot of data over the course of our initial program. And that's something that we have our eye on. And so, we'll have to track the cost effectiveness essentially, right? We know there's a lot of cost effectiveness gains from doing FLM. We would want to see if what you're describing would outweigh those cost effectiveness gains. So that's something that we've got an eye on.
I see a question from William in the chat, and I think the question is about the Regional Heat Pump Accelerator, and I'm happy to take an initial crack at responding to that, given my role in the Vermont Climate Council. From what I heard from folks at the state of Vermont, which of course there is a support and an interest in the regional market accelerator and collaborating regionally. That grant program was funded by the EPA's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Program, and Vermont took a different approach to applying for projects under that program, and had a strategy that was informed by what EPA had told the state of Vermont they thought would be happening, and that did not happen. So I just want to recognize that my understanding, and I welcome anybody from the state who would want to speak about this, is that the lack of participation in the program has nothing to do with a lack of support for the program, but was about a difference in strategy for a federal grant application that unfortunately did not pan out well for Vermont. Stephen, I welcome you to share your reflection and ask a question.
Yeah, so I just had some thoughts. I've for about a year now, I've been doing energy navigations in people's homes in Addison County, and I've basically come to the conclusion that 8 out of 10 heat pump owners don't use them right, and they have this remote. They use it like a television set. They turn it on when they go in the room. They turn it off. Just absolutely the wrong thing to be doing. And it seems to me that a solution to that could be, integrated controls to make the whole system that much more efficient, and also change the behavior with kind of a thermostat-like set point on the wall. So my question is why doesn't Efficiency Vermont offer rebates for integrated controls for already installed heat pumps? And then I guess the other thing is that I've seen a lot of systems that are hydronic that would love to see a heat pump system put on. You see those all over Europe. I think the technology's there, and I just really encourage Efficiency Vermont to keep pushing that in terms of installer base and supply chain on that, because I think that would make a big hit in Vermont.
Yeah, Stephen, appreciate you flagging those. I'll take the last one first. So absolutely, we are keeping an eye on and working to train the installer base related to air-to-water. We actually had a great air-to-water heat pump summit just a month ago over in Winooski. We had well over 100 installers from Vermont. We had some folks who even flew in from other regions, other parts of the country. We brought in a nationally renowned expert named John Siegenthaler, who is very close to the development of this technology, and was able to really help folks understand that application in Vermont, because we know that is a huge proportion of heating systems in the state. It's my own backup system I haven't turned on in a couple of years since I installed some mini splits. So absolutely, that is on the radar. It's something we're going to continue to focus on. As Phil noted, we have had a rebate for air-to-water since 2019, and we are beginning to see higher proportions of installations. It is more complicated and something that is more expensive upfront. So good to see it moving up the adoption curve. It is still early days. On the first piece around integrated controls, I really appreciate you flagging that because the current rebate, as you know, is focused on time of installation and encouraging people to install integrated controls at that point. It's a little tricky to do it as a retrofit because of how the benefits and of that installation are captured. So currently, we mentioned we have a statewide program, and that it is in collaboration with distribution utilities. As you probably are aware of, in Vermont, there's something called Tier 3, which allows electric distribution utilities, encourages them to support fuel switching. So from fossil fuel to electric usage. We have worked really hard to make sure in collaboration with utilities that there's a consistent rebate statewide where possible. For something like integrated controls installed on an existing system, there aren't any more electric benefits that we as an electric utility, efficiency utility, can capture. So it becomes more of a tier 3 opportunity at that point versus installing at the point when a system is first installed. It just gets a little bit tricky with our system to capture and appropriately frame up those benefits based on sort of how we're set up in Vermont. There are huge benefits. There are little tricky challenges as well. And I will note too, it is all the more tricky because a lot of times it's not something customers are like researching, asking for, right? You kind of come to it because you've had a conversation, you recognize those benefits. It's not the same as sort of a heat pump installation in general, where we kind of see consumer awareness and adoption moving. They want to install it. It takes a little bit more work in that funnel of working with a customer to get them to appreciate these benefits, much less kind of want to take the step of getting an additional installation. So, but I appreciate you flagging it. I don't think it's something that is out of bounds. It's just a little trickier to implement and something we're gonna have to work on over time.
Thanks.
I appreciate the additional comments and questions in the chat. I'm recognizing that we're already a bit over what we had communicated, but I'll just invite our presenters, if there's anything that you see in the chat or anything else that you wanted to be sure to share before we close out. I welcome you to do that. And then we'll get these slides in this recording posted as soon as we can. But yeah, Kelly, Phil, Nate, Bridget, or Tara, anything else you'd like to share or respond to?
I'll just say thanks. I mean, it's great to see so many folks who are really interested and invested in this work, and looking forward to continuing to help support it through the EAN group.
Yes, thank you very much for hosting us and for all the great presentations and participation from the audience.
Great. Well, please stay tuned. We'll share as soon as we have it ready information about the third webinar with heat pump contractors and heat pump users from that kind of on the ground perspective. And if you have feedback on either of the first 2 webinars or for the team to consider going ahead, please, you can be in touch with Kara Robacek, who supports that team, EAN's network manager and deputy director. I'm going to put in the chat a link to the landing page for this team. So that's where you can find the recordings and the slides. And Kara put her email in the chat already. So those are a couple of resources to take with. And thank you so much for joining today. And thank you again to our presenters for all the time you shared with us and the time preparing. Very helpful. Take care, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks everyone.
everyone.
Bye.